Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 540 of Constructive Criticism. I'm your host, Heezy. I'm joined by my co-host, Abe Stein.
It's really fun to do the 540 episode because now this is the Cube episode, right? We're gonna do it like the 540.
I hate to break it to you, man. It's not. It's not. We're not doing a Cube.
I prepared for the wrong episode. This is gonna be really interesting.
It'll be fine. You played it at RCQ this weekend. I think we'll make it. We're gonna talk about standard at Atlanta, and what I want this to be is like the for the listeners is like that moment that Pikachu is in the final battle for Ash Ketchum in the World Championship, where he's like, "Let's do this," and he like turns around his cap, and then they play the original theme song, and then people who watched the show 20 years ago start crying, even though they haven't watched it for the last 15 years. That's the episode that I want to create today.
Okay, that seems like a pretty lofty goal. How are we gonna do that?
Well, standard is that good, and we're going to talk about it.
That's true. Standard is really good. I mean, I think that to kind of cut through the jokey jokes here, and the however quality bit I was doing there of not being prepared. No, standard is in a really, really awesome place. I think this weekend in Atlanta, we saw a lot of the metagame cycling over on itself and innovating and old strategies becoming viable again because of new strategies, and just a lot of what you see out of, and what I remember seeing out of a lot of really great standard formats in the past. I think it's made for really great standard format in the present. I think the Spotlight series in Atlanta was a fantastic showcase of the format and the quality of standard. And I mean, I think it's definitely, it feels like that moment of even though this is something maybe you didn't experience for, years and years and years, seeing it all happen again in front of your eyes brings a soft tears. I know that it's been like 5 years since we saw a GP style open entry large event that no one had to qualify for. Everyone just got to jam in, and it was really cool to see not only a new class of top 8 competitors, including some of the present greats, but also seeing some of the greats from eras past continue to succeed in this one. I mean, I know that looking through this event, I saw so many names that I recognized in the top 16, top 32, the 12-3 deck lists, and also had a lot of dogs in the race, including Mason, who's not joining us today because his throat. His voice has been killing him, and he's needing to take a rest on that. But it's been just a really cool format to see evolve, and with a few weeks, just about a month left in the existing iteration of the standard format before we get Aether Drift, and the format continues to turn over. I think it's just it's really great to see and experience that. I know that I was pretty excited to see just all of the innovation that came out of it. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot to talk about.
Yeah, I'm just going to dive into the metagame really quick and kind of the expected metagame going into the event for a lot of people. And we're going to talk about things that if you were kind of in the know in this situation, because I think that contextually is important. And I'm going to start with Esper Pixie because it was considered a known quantity that was doing really well in the challenges that people were still innovating on, as it was a new deck. Just going into this event, it did a lot of the things that the Terror deck did, but it also had different elements and was a little bit more aggressive. Obviously, former host of the show, Matt Kling, I think, has 2 standard top 8s with the deck in the last week in the challenges, including I think a win. Was going into the event. It and I would say Dimir were considered the best decks, with this deck having a stellar Dimir matchup that we knew about. The next deck.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was probably the deck that was the most recent development in the format coming in. it's not surprising that was kind of a deck that people had the most questions about coming in. But I think the rest of the format, like I think you're about to get into there, is has been kind of there's a lot of decks that have been viable over the entire standard season, from things like mono red aggro to Gruul aggro, Dimir midrange, Golgari midrange, mono white caretakers control, various forms of domain with Zur or without Zur. This format was really a wide open, metagame. There was a lot going on, and also a lot to explore. Decks like Otters, which were kind of the initial shells that kind of showed the Storm Chasers' talent, like this town ain't big enough engine off for the first time. The decks that continued to use that and innovate on that, like the Valerian Terror deck that like people like Mason played. There's a really large breadth to the format, and I think that the decks that really broke out and the decks that people were prepared for, like the decks that really broke out were the ones that were prepared for that and the next thing. Like, it was really cool to see. I don't know how you feel about this, Spencer, but it was cool to see the innovation within the stock decks, as well as the innovation within these kind of unrefined or still being refined strategies like Pixie, down to like Gruul aggro with ley lines being the deck that wins. Just kind of a lot going in a lot of places.
I wanted to get into the Gruul aggro deck as something that when we get into results, but I want to talk about how the metagame was kind of set from like the Moto level for a lot of people, because that was the results that we had. We had like RCQ results in Moto, right? And one of the things that ended up happening is that Azorius, like Octopus, came back because it was good against the things that were good against Dimir. Specifically, like the Flood Color decks. And then it turns out that it's not good against the Esper Flood Color deck. And the Esper Flood Color deck is good against things that are good against that. And it was like this whole thing where now we're in this place where, like you said, there's mice decks, prowess decks in red, and then just like straight up mono red. So we have 3 different types of red decks, and we have different splashes for them. You can be mice and be white, you can be mice and be red, you can be mice and be green, you can be prowess and be white, you can be enchantments, mice and be green, you can be enchantments and be white. And there's this breadth of red decks that all have slightly different angles that they attack from. And that's all coming from the fact that a month ago, Jeskai Convoke won 3 challenges and was easily the best deck, and people wanted to find a way to beat it, and the way that they did that was with Boros. And Boros completely falls off in this tournament, just due to the kind of the nature of the metagame shifts. But let's get into the results that you're talking about. We have transformational Gruul with Leyline of Residence and Slickshot in the main. Like a deck that for a lot of people had completely fallen off. I know for some people they had thought that Esper Pixie and Gruul Mice were just the best deck, and there was not really a reason to go out of that. And then the top, 2 of the top 8 are in fact Gruul aggro Mice decks. But, the winning deck is this transformational deck. And, we see Dimir Enchantments, which is, just, another take on this town ain't big enough, and Storm Chaser's talent going into another archetype as its engine. And I don't know, man, like, I was impressed by the breadth of the way that decks innovated. You look at the domain deck in the top 8, that's not close to anything anyone was doing on Magic Online. You look at the Gruul aggro deck that won, not close. Like, this is a deck from 2 months ago that took over by storm. People adjusted, and then this person is like, now let's jam 4 Snakeskin Veils and let's just go hard on the Gruul side rather than the mono red side. And I don't know, I think that the results speak to, like, there are some cards that were forgotten, such as, in my opinion, Slickshot Show Off, with just people just were like, this card's dead, you can't play it anymore. Turns out that's not true, and that's really interesting.
Yeah, I think like to kind of talk about decks one thing at a time here. I think that I do think the domain deck that top aided in the hands of Gray, Payne, like her list, which appeared to just be a pretty standard Zur list, in my opinion. Like is doing things that domain wasn't doing before, but like I think the biggest thing was just being prepared for the metagame that she saw. You know, like she had main deck split up, main deck Day of Judgment, and then only 2 Sunfalls, like really focusing on even main decking like 2 Elspeth Smites, really focusing on making sure to win as many of those game ones against the aggro decks as possible. And looking at the deck that was the most represented in the like top 32, like Rule Aggro was a majority of the top decks in the tournament. That's, I think, not on accident. I think that package, the mice package, is the strongest proactive thing you can be doing. And in part, you know, while there are a lot of decks that are trying to kind of be a bit over that, and that's where I think the domain deck gets its advantage, is by being a little bit bigger than those mid-range decks. It does have a real problem with the aggro decks that you can only bolster so much of. So like that's why I think that domain deck is really an outlier, is because when you look at it, about half of the winner's metagame was these aggressive decks in the form of Gruul aggro, or decks that are playing by the rules of engagement set by the Gruul aggro deck, which is why I think that while Dimir midrange was a good choice for the tournament based on results, and I think was a lot of people's safe choice. I mean, it's the deck that I kind of have defaulted to, even though it's been getting back into the standard format, even though I haven't been able to be as in the trenches with it as I would like. It's a deck that has all the tools to beat red or beat the red decks, just needs a little bit of play, and also has the tools to really beat anything, right? It's mid-range deck. But the second place list by Scott McNamara took a lot of the learnings of what made Esper Pixie really good, which I think is playing again by the rules of engagement that red set out, of saying, okay, the red deck is like the mice deck, and the shell especially is one that really forces you to be interacting within the first few turns, or else you're going to get overrun. You know, it's going to find ways to get enough cards churning and enough ways to either trigger Valiant or just push through enough damage that it's going to put you behind in the early game, unless you're doing something like what the Esper Pixie decks do, which is take a bunch of game actions that also trade for cards through, cards like Hopeless Nightmare, just attacking raw card quantity, a 1-for-1 at 1 mana, or Nowhere to Run is an easy, effective answer that plays very well with a lot of the other powerful cards in the strategy, like Storm Chaser's Talent and This Town Ain't Big Enough, finding ways to break those things up and buy time. I think that Scott McNamara's deck was probably the most innovative in the tournament, in that it took the strength of the Pixie deck, which was rebuying all of these permanents, and taking just the essential pieces of that in things like Fear of Isolation, This Town Ain't Big Enough, Nowhere to Run, Storm Chaser's Talent, and putting those to work in the shell of Blue Black.
The best quote unquote deck from 2 weeks ago. I completely agree. And in all honesty, like, I don't know if you got to watch the finals, but like it was not close. But I don't know that that's like a symptom of problems with the blue black deck as much as it was like this, like just the way the cards lined up. And I think that this is the first. I talked about this in coaching this week with somebody I was coaching about incentives, and like they were asking how to look at deck lists and what deck lists look like. And I've talked about this before in coaching, but their approach to it was very interesting to me. And you're like, well, how do you weigh like a 4-3 from a challenge versus a 5-0 on a league? I was like, oh man, I value the 4-3 a little bit higher, but like, they're kind of close. I mean, your incentives aren't lined up, right? Like you don't have the same thing. And this is the first time that standard incentives have been equal in paper. And what I mean by that, and you may be like, what do you mean? Like, don't RCQs exist? Yeah, but not everybody plays RCQs for the same reason. When you get into a 2-day event where there's huge prizes, the Pro Tour's on the line, stuff like that, it starts to align incentives for people to hide information, for people to really innovate and things like that. Whereas, like, yeah, that can happen at your RCQ level, and like somebody could discover something, but the incentives aren't there for them to put in the same amount of work that they would for an event like this. And so, thus, hit or miss, the incentives creep up. Like everybody is more incentivized to work harder. And I think that the blue-black deck, and honestly the Gruul transformation deck, both show that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that both of those decks, I think it's very fitting they met in the finals, because I do think both of those decks were the most forward-thinking deck lists from the tournament. Now, it's easy to say that because they're first and second place, but, looking at a world where the way that the Gruul decks had primarily adapted to the mid-range decks was by slowing down a step or two to be a little bit more resilient, and that was exposing them to the high action economy of the Esper Pixie deck, in just getting a little bit more ground out by playing these slower cards that allowed the Esper Pixie deck to exploit it. The Dimir deck hopping on that train of, if these Gruul decks are slowing down and I'm able to reduce my mana values by 1 or 2 here and there, I'm going to start 2-spelling more often and trading cards off more often. That's going to be more profitable for me over the course of the game, because I'm going to be playing more cards that interact in the early turns of the game where things matter most. And what I think is really, really smart about the Leyline build of Gruul is that it says, okay, we can play that game, but because your deck is haphazardly trading cards with mine in hopes of running me out of resources before I can kill you, I'm going to play something that does not get attritioned out in the same way that these decks are trying to, right? The number one game plan by the mid-range decks in order to beat the Gruul decks was no longer to land good pinpointed removal spells and have good exchanges in mana on individual turns. It became to attrition them out on resources,
right,
and shut them down off of what they needed.
I mean, you see,
you can't do that to the Leyline deck.
You see that in the finals, right? Like, you see this deck now has moved to 4 nowhere to runs, and this town ain't big enough, and is only playing 2 cutdowns, and then it loses to the Leyline deck in the finals, right? Like, it has 4 cutdowns in the 75. It's not like it's ignoring the possibility that this could happen, but the other deck is like, I'm going to push this direction, and the other deck is like, I'm also going to push this direction, and I'm going to beat all the decks that didn't get to where you were. Like, I'm going to beat all of them. And to be fair, guess what? I played a bunch since this event. Mono red Leyline is back on the menu, folks. People are doing it because they don't want to buy the green lands. It's way faster, and you've got to respect it both on MTGO and on Arena. And it's like, okay, like, we're a swinging pendulum. That's a sign of a good format. That's a good thing.
Yeah, I think that really tracking the development of this format from where it started to seeing it swing all the way in the direction of inevitability, and seeing the mono white caretakers decks be, are these decks the best decks, to then combo decks that prey on them, like the Team Marauders deck, to kind of continuing to swing back around through mid-range, and there's been a really good turnover between things. I think that really what this shows more than anything, and I hope we continue to see in these Spotlight Series events, is that the metagame is capable of continuing to evolve. And this kind of, I hope, inspires players at their RCQ level or on Magic Online to continue to put into practice that that practice of innovating, of really looking at what the play patterns are and looking at what the cards being played are, and taking the time to find ways to position and exploit those play patterns. Because as was really shown in this event, and I think is probably my biggest takeaway as an observer of the Spotlight Series, is that those players who did that were heavily rewarded. The players who were willing to do things that other people might have initially just written off and maybe not even considered, like going back to playing Leyline and Slickshot Show Off, to take advantage of the fact that with just a little bit of protection, it was very difficult for the blue-black decks, who are not playing a lot of removal and not able to leave up a lot of removal, to beat that kind of clock and that kind of speed. For a deck like blue-black, for someone to take the Dimir list and say, okay, I can take this shell of this town ain't big enough and talent, and I can use this as my late game engine and condense my early game in the same way that Esper Pixie did, without sacrificing my mana base and without sacrificing some of the spells I want to play, and getting to be a little bit bigger than the Pixie deck even, is like, it shows the thought put into it, and it shows that thought being correct about the way that the metagame was. It shows a really strong belief about what the format was about on this weekend, what the rules of engagement were, and how to play with them in mind, and how to build with them in mind. And all of that, I think, it's honestly been inspiring to see that be how it plays out, that those two decks at the top were not just two stock decks that you would see every week at your RCQ, played by good players. No, it's that good players played new ideas or new takes on existing ideas, or were willing to take risks because of the stakes to innovate and to have a strong result. And there's nothing, I think, you can say more about that, and that's awesome. That is what competitive Magic's about.
I do think it's awesome. I want to call out some people that did the grinder thing, though, that still had good results. So one of them is former guest of the show, Connor. Connor, is it Mole or Molole? I don't know how to say his name, and I feel bad. But Player of the Year from the NRG, I think 2 years ago, that we had on the show, just played Gruul Mice, straight up Gruul Mice, innovated, like a lot of people were saying with the patch, the Paw Patch creature, and I think that safe choices are okay, and I don't want to get too distracted from the fact that that's fair. If your best event is a safe choice because you don't have the time or the network or whatever, or if you believe this is the best deck and you want the best version of it, that's not a wrong choice. That's not what we're saying. You just were rewarded in this event for innovating.
Yeah, and I think that that's a matter of this standard format. I mean, there's not there wasn't a lot of room to succeed playing a stock deck, because really, when we talk about innovating, it's not these people invented brand new decks. It's the people took ideas from existing decks. I think we actually had 5 guests in the top 32 or something. At least names that I recognize that we've at least invited on the podcast. And a lot of them were Esper Pixie and Gruul and stuff, and I think that yes, it is good that you are rewarded for this, but also that's the incentives. Your incentives now say be that far ahead. Where the incentives of a challenge, that's not what they are. Your incentives of a challenge are to top 8 and get yourself to a win if you can, but the difference between a top 8 and a top 16 is not even a win in the challenges, because there's no intentional draws. There's the huge difference, and also, the prizing is a difference between some treasure chests in your play points back, exactly. $80 and $120 or something.
Right, exactly.
Or not even that. It's $40 and $80 between top 16 and top 32. In an event like this, which is where, we talk about it a lot, Mason champions it a lot too, of we really don't know anything until pressure is put on the format. And we talk about this in the context of the RC coming up. talk about it in the context of this event before it happened, of like, we really don't know until you see the players who have everything riding on it invest their all, because they have a reason to invest their all, right? That's one of the magical things about the Pro Tour. Is that the Pro Tour gives anyone an incentive to really put it on the line and put their money where their mouth is. And I don't know. For me, it's really cool to see the first GP back be one where two people who put their money where their mouth was and did things that no one else really would have come to do on their own if they were just playing Moto, came through and won. That's not to say that, I mean, some of the best players in the world right now, like CFT Sock, they just played Teamer Otters with the work that they had done on it.
My understanding is that they got that list on Thursday.
They put that, they finalized that list on Thursday. They were just constantly working on it, though. And
my understanding is they got that list on Thursday. Is that not true?
They had been playing Teamer Otters,
but not
on and off for like months.
Oh, okay. Somebody told me
they
on their team somebody gave CFT that Otters list on Thursday, and they just registered it.
Yes, I think that what happened is they were interested in playing Otters, didn't find anything better, and then Ryan Condon gave them that they've been working on. But also, I mean, like, if you go and watch Joint Exploration, which
I'm not taking anything away. I'm saying they do a lot of work on Otters, and they have done a lot of work on Otters, and they've played a lot of Otters, and they were like, you know what, I think this deck is good and well positioned, and they played it, and they're one of the best players in the world with especially when it comes to combo decks like these, with a very intimate understanding of them, probably one of the most knowledgeable people in the world about the deck, and they had a great result. There's many ways to achieve success, but I think I don't know, for me, it's rather poetic. I think that that's awesome, and I think it's like what I want, and what I try to take away to be as an observer. I'll just say that, like,
think about the event, innovate more.
The thing that I love about this specific event is, and what I really learned from it is, like, sometimes it's okay to trust your gut. Like, sometimes, like, if there's a reason not to, and you found reasons that you're wrong, check your results and check your process, but, like, it's okay to trust your gut, man.
Yeah, I mean, if you have a really good idea and you keep looking at the way it's playing out and it seems like a really good idea, I mean, I think taking that risk and putting your money where your mouth is, putting your tournament life in your hands, it's a great way to learn and grow. And it's a great way to succeed too. If you win, it's awesome. If you lose, you learn. Right? And I think that you're not going to have the regret for doing that. And that like, honestly, like, for me, my biggest takeaway from, like, looking at these results and everything, especially as I look at a year ahead where my goal is to play more and like put myself in the streets more, like, being the player who takes the risk at their RCQ is what's going to let you grow. And I think that being the player who takes the risk, like, at the GP level, seeing that be a successful, it really does move me.
Should we talk about that? Because I have $100 RCQ, and we have to talk about what we would play. And this is a bigger risk for me, in my opinion, because I'm already qualified. I don't need to play an RCQ this weekend, but I have $100 RCQ that pays for a plane ticket. That is a $500 travel voucher to first place guaranteed, regardless of how many people show up to this $100 entry fee RCQ. First place gets $500 travel voucher, which I live in Utah, so, like, going to Minnesota, or it's Connecticut, right? It's it's Connecticut. I don't know. It's the city. It's the city from Gilmore Girls. How do you not know that?
I never watched Gilmore Girls.
You should. It's so funny. Anyway, so what we would play is interesting for me this week. I've already won an RCQ. I've tried the deck that took first, the deck that took second. I tried the Celestia Tokens deck. I already have an expert on the Esper Pixie deck, which are 4 of the best performing decks in the tournament. I'm gonna play Team Tear again. I have updates for Esper Pixie, which is, I believe, going to be very popular in my local metagame. And I think my updates are just very good overall and have made my deck better. And honestly, like, I know that I'm the only person in the world playing this deck, but my results continue to be very good, and I think that I have solved a problem with the mana that you can solve with the other decks. I did try Bant for the same reason, but I find that being able to bounce your removal spell just like you can in something like Sultai, but not having to sideboard abhorrently is very helpful. I don't know. I would play Team Tear, and I am going to play Team Tear this weekend at the most expensive tournament I have probably ever entered. I don't think I've ever paid a $100 entry fee for a tournament before. So, yeah.
I think, I mean, I have not had a chance to play with any of the decks from Spotted Series yet. So this is based on my evaluation of the format moving forwards, and you know, my sight read of the decks as well as the matches that I watched. I do really like the Dimir Enchantments deck. I think that it is a very strong innovation on the foundation of the Pixie deck. And I think there is room to adapt it a bit to cover if you're concerned about the Gruul aggro deck. I also think that there's a bit of a learning curve in terms of, like, at an RCQ level for the next couple of weeks. Like, I would be surprised if players were playing that Gruul A-line deck to the same quality that the winner was playing, like Nick Odenheimer was playing at.
Dude, those mulligans are tough. I'm going to be honest with you.
Exactly. And I think at the RCQ level, like, I would prefer, and especially given that I wouldn't have many reps with a deck like this myself either, because of kind of returning to the standard format after a prolonged break, I would lean towards something with a little bit less punishing mulligans, in terms of things that have a little bit more clear game planning. In the form of the Dimir Enchantment deck, I think it seems really solid. It has really clean mana, which I really appreciate, and it's also playing some very strong engines that give it a lot of grind, that are very pesky for a lot of the decks in the format already. Like, I think This Town is Big Enough and Stormchaser's Talent, as well as, like, I mean, even just Fear of Isolation as one of the more powerful 2-drops you can play when you're playing cards like Hopeless Nightmare and Stormchaser's Talent. Like, all of that, I think, leads to being a deck that is very good at playing in the turns that matter. And I think that you can build with a little bit more respect to the aggro decks if you feel like you need to, but I would probably be starting there, and that's what I'm hoping to be able to assemble for my RCQs coming up.
I think that we're coming from a similar place, that we like the package of removal spells, This Town is Big Enough, Stormchaser's Talent, and, like, things that progress that game plan. And I think we're approaching it from basically the same standpoint. I don't think there's that much difference in our approach to things. And I also think that, like, you know, I was about to switch off into the Gruul deck for what it's worth for this weekend, and I was like, you know what though, like, people are way more likely to switch on to, like, Hopeless Nightmare, and, like, I just want to be playing, like, Obstinate Bailofts. Like, I have plenty of room in my sideboard for those. Like, let's just do that instead. So I don't disagree with you at all for what it's worth. I just am like, all right, well, I'm gonna do this. Whereas I think the winning deck list will get a lot more respect from, like, the random RCQ grinder. Maybe I'm crazy.
Yeah, I think, I mean, genuinely, I think if I was playing Dimir, like, I don't know, I think one of the weaknesses of Pixie is that it plays a lot of these things and has to play a lot of these things to enable so many of its cards. But, like, I don't think I'd like have cards like Hopeless Nightmare in my deck post sideboard against a deck like Terror. For the exact reason that I would, or even against a lot of decks where
I mean, the thing is like Terror has never played Bailoff before.
But it's not. I mean, Pixie hasn't been a deck, while Terror has been a deck people put time into before. You know what I mean?
I don't know. Yeah, I we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
I hope it's on your side. You know, I'm hoping to see Spencer win that ticket. But you know, at the same time, like I think that there's room for. I think a lot of people, and especially I think a lot of people get drawn to the easy answer when it comes to things like that. Like I think preying on the very obvious play pattern of they're attacking my hand repeatedly with things like Hopeless Nightmare, therefore I should play cards like Wiltleaf Liege or like Obstinate Bailoff is very easy. And Obstinate Bailoff especially is one that's like, well, it gains me life too against the red deck, so I really need to board an additional anti-red.
Yeah,
cards.
I did cut anti-red cards to do that.
Right, like that's a very obvious thing. I think that one of the things that makes me a little bit more drawn to Dimir and Jammets is kind of a last statement on my reasoning is just that I think there's more play to presenting those. Right, I can choose if I'm putting those play patterns into play, and the more that people try to react and be cute and get me, the more that I can exploit them by having them have cards that aren't good on rate in their hand because I'm not giving them the opportunity.
Yeah, I totally understand. And, you know, I like that you called out the, you know, it was some easy answers for me. I will say, though, that I would guarantee that I'm favored in that full color mirror.
I think so. I think that the Terror deck, I mean, genuinely, I think that the Terror deck, because of the fact that the Pixie deck plays a lot fewer removal spells that actually matter to you, and I think they're a little bit worse of a this town ain't big enough deck because their threats just don't pack on like as much muscle. I would definitely believe that that you're favored, but I think that it's hard to say, and it's probably not. You know, it's probably not lopsided.
I would disagree. I bet it is. We should do a clash sometime. We should.
Why don't you let me play some matches in the deck first, then I'll see if I can.
All right, you get some matches in the deck. If you believe your statement, I'll do a clash with you. I'm doing clash with Matt this week, but I think we're doing modern on Thursday. So we gotta wait. Or I mean, I can do multiple, but that's gonna do it for what we would play. I think that's also our final thoughts. Should we just go into Patreon?
Yeah, I mean, I think, unless you have anything else to say, I think it's really awesome to see this event. I'm excited to talk about the future events that are happening. I was really excited, especially with the announcement of Denver being a limited one. I think it's really awesome to see the return of big
hurt
Magic
me so
events.
bad. Oh, I don't have limited friends, so my group chats were RIP Denver limited for all of my Salt Lake friends, and I'm
gonna say it's in the kindest way possible.
No, hold on. Can I say something first?
Sure.
I've tried really hard. I love limited, sealed specifically. I mean, I'll make it really apparent for everybody who's doesn't understand how much I love sealed. That sealed core set is my literal favorite Magic format. I love Magic to its bare bones that much. That is, if you're like, Spencer, the aliens are coming, you can pick 10 people or 9 people to have a 10v10. You get to pick the format and the 10 people. I'm going core set limited, sealed, top 8 draft, and we're going hard. But my homies, they don't love it like I do. It's boring to them.
I humbly invite them to grow up and booster draft. Let's go, baby. Let's go.
I love it. We have new patrons this week. If you become a patron every week, we invite you patreon.com/ccmg, and you get a shout out on the show. And if you become a patron $5 or more, you get access to the Patreon question of the week, which will need to be edited this week because this one's a doozy. What would your world champ card be that would actually get approved. I'm going to go first because I know you need time to think, Abe.
Yeah, give me a minute on this.
So, my invitational card already exists. And I actually already won a Pro Tour with it. Or not a Pro Tour. Oh, PTQ with it, sorry. Woo! And that's Sarkin Unbroken. Already exists. Savage Knuckleblade already exists. But I have another one that I've thought about that is... mine would be a Planeswalker. I think Planeswalkers are one of the coolest cards. It would be Teamer, but it would probably be literally just Teamer mana, like blue, red, green. It would have a plus that made mana. I would want it to make Teamer mana specifically. I wouldn't let it do any color of mana. I would want it to -2. At this point in my life, I would love it to - to make a dog token or a hound token for my dog Obi. And then its ultimate to me would be like, I don't know, like search your library for 6 lands, put them into play tapped. Like, whatever.
Get a Valakut emblem.
Yeah, no, oh man, that would be way too good. That would be sick. I don't think I'd make it that good. I think you could just build your deck to do that. I don't think you need like the help. I don't know. It would be search your library for X number of lands. It actually, at 3 mana, it'd probably be way less than 6 lands. It maybe like search your library for like 3 lands, put them into play tapped, so that you could use it multiple times or something. But it'd be like a high one, but you're like, the plus and minus work out. I don't know exactly. That would definitely be mine. I think like a 1/1 or a 2/1 like dog token is like not that much for a -1 at this point in Magic history. And I think that like making mana as a +1 or +2 is not that big of a deal. And you just kind of have to balance it for the minus of getting 3 lands, because the real card advantage comes from like the like, okay, like we're getting 3 lands of any type. What does that need to equal, and balancing it from there. Also, I just really want it to be modern playable to make Teamer Scapeship playable again, so that's all we're asking. Did you hear that crack? That was so loud.
I did not.
Oh man,
I did not.
that was
Sorry to say. You have to edit that in.
I don't know. I'm not going to edit a back crack in, but that was a big back crack. What about you? Have you thought about yours? If it's not Jessica, I don't believe you.
What?
Hammer Time? There's got to be something.
There's a card. So some people some truest friends of mine know that I have a cube where I've designed a handful of cards. And
I do know this. Hold on. Wow. That was insulting. I do know that you have a cube you design cards. I also know that you design cards for fun. How am I supposed to know which of the cards you would have?
I'm getting there.
All right.
And also, Spencer, you are one of my truest of friends. I'm saying this for the listeners. One of them, which is one of my favorites, but also is a nightmare in templating, is a take on Last Stand. Which actually, the real nightmare to templating was that I had to change it because I didn't have Snowlands in my cube. But it's actually called Snow Business. It's the original design that I pitched. Snow Business is a 5 color X where it does an effect for all of the colors, like equal number of snow mana spent on the spell. So it's like deal X damage to a creature, your opponent loses X life, like create X 1/1s, look at the top X cards of your library, put one into your hand, and like gain X life or something like that. I'd have to go back and check. You just want to sing
"There's no business like Snow Business"? Is that why you want this card to be real?
I don't want to sing it, but I think it would be fun if people. I think it would be fun if people had the opportunity to. That's all. I've heard way more annoying card names and way
for
more
what it's
songs,
worth,
and I've made up more annoying songs
for what it's worth.
Cards. than Snow Business would be.
Never seen this card. And also, I think you've only sent me one card ever for your cube.
I need to rework all of them. I haven't touched that cube. So,
I did know it existed. You did ask me about it when you joined the podcast early, but I was like, oh, is Abe about to talk about all the people that like get in depth on his cube? Did you? Should we answer? You were on the last. Wait, were you? The best cube experience episode? Or question? You were.
I was. Yeah, it was. Yeah, because I talked about Hogak in the cube. The vintage cube.
That is going to do it. Thank you so much, Nick. He's got Snow Business. I've got Heezy the Plane. So I probably would not name it Heezy. I don't know what I would name it. I don't know.
Heezylicious.
You're Heezylicious. You shared our sponsor, Untap.gg. This is one that I'm just to be honest, we might push more next year because it's really simple. You click the link, we get $1 after you sign up. That's it. I'm being transparent. That's what it is. I've never said that on the podcast, Dave, but that's how simple it is. So just do it. That's more than 1,000 views on YouTube.
Yeah. Yeah, like, please, if you love us, click the link. If you hate us, also click the link.
Yeah, just
whatever you do, click the link.
Just do it. Like it.
Get Untap.gg on your computer.
I don't like affiliate sponsorships very often. I am in conversations with them all the time, as Abe knows. Of like, whoa, what does this look like? Oh, well, that's terrible. We're not going to do that. This one's really good. Like, all you have to do is sign up. If you play Arena, just do it. It's worth it I promise it's worth it.
I use hand trackers like this and deck trackers like this for free all the time. It is a good thing.
You don't even have to sign up for the premium. I promise it's worth it. The premium is worth it, but like you don't even have to do it. It is like you doing it is literally like giving us 1,000 views on YouTube. It is that good. So thank you to Untap.gg. It is definitely worth the cost. And then the swag store. Abe, I don't know if you noticed. I'm in a very different space. Did you notice? You didn't even notice?
I noticed there's some things different about your space. You've rearranged a little bit. I wasn't going to bring it up and put you on blast about how
the fact that my camera's up here instead of down here.
Yeah, how much taller the camera's coming at you from. The fact there's nothing on the TV behind you. Less couch.
There is stuff on around the TV. But, yeah, I got a new desk and stuff, and I need a new desk mat. Cleaning my stuff, my old, like, RPTQ playmats were disgusting underneath them, and I did not realize it. And I need to go get a CCMTG desk mat now, as Abe types in stuff. Yeah.
As I go to the swag store to look at how much that's going to be and how great that's going to be.
I'll buy you one. Do you want one? I didn't get you a Christmas present.
I don't think I need a desk mat.
No, I'm going to buy you one.
I don't think I need a desk mat, but I will let you know.
You pick something there. I'll buy you something.
And I'll show it on the episode. And I'll bring it to the RC and everyone can sign it.
Yeah, there's tons of stuff in there. I need a new desk mat. There's good stuff. Water bottles, life pads. I think there's stickers. I have sticker phobia, so I'll never. It's actually a reason we don't give out stickers. I have pick-a-tick-a-phobia. So, fun fact for the episode. Thank you everybody so much for listening. Abe, what the point of the show is not talking about my fears, though. It is always improving. And I'm gonna let you go first this week. What did you do to be always improving this week?
Yeah, so now that all that fun stuff about standards out of the way, I can talk about how I played standard over the weekend at a much lower level of competition at the RSQ level. And I played like pretty stock, probably a couple week old copy of Blue Black mid-range that a friend of mine had for me to borrow because I haven't been able to really assemble a deck, and I just didn't even know I was playing until the night before when I realized that there was an event going on and I had the chance to go. And it wasn't so much of the gameplay that really was my most improved moment this week, as it was just thinking about kind of the ever existing, I don't know if it's like a cliche or just like a phenomena of, I don't know if you ever feel this way, Spencer, where you play a deck for the first time and you feel like you're playing better. Like you feel like you do best when you're picking up a deck for the first time because you're kind of thinking harder about decisions in the right spot, and not overthinking things, but also not underthinking them. You don't have bad habits, but you don't really have any habits. So you're kind of, it's a little bit tricky, but once you get in a rhythm, there's kind of a magical number between, 5 games and like 25 games wherein you feel like you're really kind of winning a lot and playing really well. And I'm someone who really feels that way. And I had a moment as I was playing in the semifinals, playing in top 4 of the event, where I was playing a mirror match and I was sideboarding after losing game 1, and I was trying to figure out what really mattered and what didn't, and like thinking through the sideboarding, and I was like, man, this is the first point in this tournament where I feel like I'm actually handicapped by my lack of like detailed, intimate knowledge of like the matchup dynamics of any of the matchups I've played. I was feeling pretty confidently able to navigate most other things and lean on my understanding of the format to figure out sideboard plans that made sense and good cards and bad cards for the other matches I played. When it came to the mirror match, I wasn't certain of what was most important and what was best. And so I kind of had to go with what I felt like was my gut and what was my my evaluation of things. And I think I had a few regrets. I think I could have sideboarded it just a little bit differently after thinking and playing out the games and realizing what the best cards that were cast were and what the important pieces of the game were. But it really taught me something about, like, just having reflected earlier in that tournament on kind of the experience of playing a bit blind, leading to what I felt was some of my best play and some of my strongest, like most thorough decision making, as opposed to kind of getting lazy or kind of stashing in my brain the play patterns I'm used to, figuring out where the balance lies. Can I finish?
Yeah, go ahead. I just want to challenge what you just said.
That's fine. You can when I'm done. Okay. But for me, that was a moment of like realizing there's a balance there that I need to strike of like when it is I'm not relying on things like conventional wisdom that instruct a lot of those heuristics that can give me like a leg up or give me like a studied knowledge of the format in terms of details, like things that take a lot of matches to really hash out, which are I think a lot of times like mirror matches or just like established dynamics of known matchups, like some of the best decks. And that was something that I like realized I can kind of use that to my advantage in the future of knowing how to both think about and then the power of not having to think about some of these more conventional matchups to play to the things that I need to and to have like to balance between leveraging and like over leveraging and under leveraging the kind of conventional knowledge I normally stock up on that I didn't have for this tournament. So it was definitely a bit of just kind of like an inner world one of realizing like, oh, I made it this far on my ability to intuit and to use what I know like to guide me in these games with a deck that I haven't played much and but I also hasn't changed much and I've done a lot of thought with and seen a lot of matches of and understand pretty well to like where is it that's applying best, which is usually when it's just playing and navigating the games and playing to my outs and having an understanding of what is and is not a good strategy compared to kind of where it's appropriate to be cutting out some of that individualized thought of like, okay, what are the things that, moto grinders and arena grinders everywhere have come to determine as being true about things like mirror matches, or what does the conventional wisdom say compared to what necessarily my sideboard planning was, or what my approach was.
I'm really glad you finished, because now I have two things to talk about. The first is relating back to the last thing you said. I don't think it's a weakness to rely on historical data or historical experience when playing a new deck. I don't think that. I don't think you used the term weakness. I think you used I used a different term. It wasn't crutch. I remembered it when I said it because I wanted to challenge that it was that. But I think that it's actually a strength that you have, that you get to do that. And
I think I might have said it was a crutch.
Yeah.
Because I do feel like there are times, especially when I'm playing known decks, like there's a lot of times where if I had a little bit more time, I would have picked up this blue-black deck, read a primer or an article somewhere, and then gone with what that said.
Totally.
Rather than what I did in this tournament, which was pick up the deck with the deck list, and then just work with the 75 I had in front of me to problem solve what I knew about the format for my research. It was a very foundationally different approach because of the information I had and didn't have. But I do feel like I use it as a crutch sometimes, and I think that a lot of players, I'm not going to say it is always a crutch. I appreciate you calling that out, because I think that it's good to make that distinction.
I think that the reason that I'm challenging it is like, there are going to be some events where you're handed a deck that you're like, you just trust your homies or you trust your team, and they're like, hey, like I'm like 13-1 with this deck in the last 2 days. I don't think the format's prepared for it. Here's my sideboard guide. Let's go. Right? And then you have to trust your intuition if you play against a deck that's not on that sideboard guide or whatever, to then say, like, this is what I've got to do because this is the things that matter. So that intuition is important. It's not a crutch. It's not a weakness. It is actually a strength of yours. And that's were you handed a sideboard guide?
No, and that's where I say, like, I think I leaned on a lot of my strengths.
Yeah.
But I found a point wherein, like, I know about myself that I'll stop playing to those strengths, or I'll have developed my own understandings based on leaning on those strengths.
Yeah.
And that can lead me to positions where I am either playing in kind of the same ways and falling into a rut with the deck. Yes. But I think that in kind of the way that I thought about it during this tournament and the way that my experiences were, it kind of really made it clear to me the distinction of where I want to be in terms of that balance, and how to kind of switch in and out of it to have this moment where I was acutely aware of where I wanted to have this knowledge that I normally would have when I'm super prepared for a tournament, and kind of where that toggle is of, like, I can just grab the cards and play, and just not think about I'm supposed to be doing this or what have you. But I wished in this match that I did have what am I supposed to do to base the rest of things off of, because I didn't have the same level of context as my opponent, who was far better prepared for the mirror than I was in terms of both their sideboard plan, their deck list, like everything about it. They came in more prepared to win that matchup than I did. Well, and I think that moving forward, I want to make sure that I can do the same habits that were leading me to not playing in rote ways, and just kind of freeform playing the deck in front of me without kind of leaning on sideboard guides or things like that I might lean on typically in RCQ, and doing something else.
You kind of answered the next two things that I was going to say. One of them was, am I positioning a game in the same... Not even am I doing it. Am I trying to position the game in the way that I know that I will win because of the way my deck is constructed, because of the basics that I know of my deck? You've already answered that. That's what you were doing. That's how you're winning games. The next question is like the format knowledge question. But I think that comes from challenging the last question. But how would you possibly get that without playing the deck? Like I actually don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the ways that you get that without playing a lot of matches would be to do things like consume content or watch a bunch of streams of matches or listen to players who play the deck a lot more than you talk about the deck. I mean, one thing I really miss about the before times is just written content, because it was so much easier for me to consume and synthesize the information than watching a bunch of streams and investing the time in staring at a bunch of video content. Like, both forms of content are valuable, but it's a lot harder for me to digest quickly and efficiently the video content. But what I did, have of it and know of it from watching standard streams over the last few months gave me a lot of knowledge, and what I had from reading deck lists gave me a lot of knowledge, skills that I have and have developed. But in that match, and I think just in general there, like, I mean, something we talk about a lot on the show is plan beats no plan. And I think beyond that, the best plan has the highest chance of winning, right? I don't think I had the knowledge to have the best plan between the two of us at the table, and so I was disadvantaged. And that's something really that I think that coming up, and that's where I think, like, combining those two ideas of, like, making sure I don't ever stop being a player who's coming up with a plan the way that I do when I'm playing a deck for the first time. I kind of have to engineer it on the fly in terms of what's happening in that tournament with those deck lists and those players who are playing those archetypes on that weekend that I'm up against right then in the moment, versus what I've learned about the format and specifics from the past. So
I love it.
Bit long-winded there, but I think it's like a really important
challenged
one.
You. That's my fault that it was like that. That was me just like, I just thought it was a good conversation point. So for me, there are two for me this week. They're both pretty short, but like just getting in the, like, even when I built this desk that if you're watching the video you can see, I had my phone up as much as I could watching my former co-host Quentin playing a challenge with Blue Black Murktide to get ready for Modern, looking at Modern lists, and then I've been watching while I'm doing busy work Matt Kling, who's I think he's top 8 like 8 challenges in the last 2 months or something, like probably more than that, and really got an understanding of Esper Pixies, and just watching him. I was sick yesterday and just kind of watched him, so I didn't even give any thoughts, and like I was just really impressed with his stuff, and like surrounding yourself with like-minded people who are going to put in work and that you can ask questions to and that will give solid answers. Today, after work, Matt was able to give me a lot of thoughts about sideboarding on decks that I was playing, and like, because he's played against these decks and he thinks these cards are important. He's played all these challenges, and I just think that that's so valuable, and building those type of relationships, not just with people that like play challengers or whatever, but just building relationships with people that you trust is so important, and having them back on the table for me is really great. So that is going to do it for this week. You can join the conversation by leaving a comment, join the Patreon Discord, you can even join the public Discord, but the best way that Abe says that we should say every week is leave that YouTube comment. It helps the algorithm, it helps out the show, and I have even turned off approvals. You have free reign. If you think that my hair looks bad, go ahead and say it. There's some filters on there, but you can go ahead and leave a YouTube comment and let me know how bad my hair is or how great the episode is. That's preferred. And then share the episode.
Just use our comment section as your personal Twitter feed. Just start posting every thought you have
about the episode. Or not. Maybe not. I don't know. I don't know how that works.
Try it. Let's find out. Someone, I dare you.
You can also follow us on Blue Sky, Twitter, and Threads. It's CCMTG or CCMTG Pod everywhere. Like, comment, subscribe, and review. Where can people find you, Abe?
You can find me anywhere I can be found at More Nothings. Most now that is Blue Sky, and I don't really do much posting on Twitter, but I am there, and you can still DM me there. This is where most people can find me because most people are on there. DM me there for coaching, or send me an email over at morenothings@gmail.com. Just put coaching in the description. Where can people find you, Spencer?
You can find me at Spencer13H on Blue Sky and on Threads at Heezy Game on Twitter. You can DM me for coaching in any of those places now. I want to thank Mason for directing at least one person to me that wanted my coaching. I did not realize that my DMs were closed on Blue Sky, and I feel bad. And then you can follow Mason at Mason E. Clark everywhere. Mason also got to announce that he's doing coverage for the RC in Portland. So finally, we're going to see the triple CC MTG final with coverage by Mason and me beating Abe in the finals.
Yeah, we sat down and we talked about it from our episodes last week.
Oh, is that why
we're like, how are we gonna do this with me and Spencer meeting in the finals, but also Mason being there in the finals? And this is what we worked out. So thanks to Star City for that. Really appreciate that. Thanks to Wizards of the Coast for hiring Cedric as play design manager, meaning he was no longer going to be able to do coverage for the event. Really, just everyone worked together.
Everyone really worked together for us.
And now all that me and Spencer need to do is be in the finals together.
We just need to win 13
on.
matches of Magic. So
yeah, just like 18 in a row or whatever.
Yeah. Thank you everybody so much for listening, and we'll see you all next week with a brand new episode of Distracted for the season.
Magic, 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 magic.